that we might have a few more people join, but I want to kick it off and I want to welcome you all here. And I want to thank Dan for taking time with us. Our heart for this time is Dan's going to share a little bit and talk about leadership and staffing specifically within all the issues we deal with as leaders in the church. And then he's going to give a lot of time for interaction, a lot of time for asking questions. Some of you sent in those questions ahead of time, which is great. I've got the list. I'd forwarded some of them to Dan ahead of time. And so he's seen some of them, and the others that I more recently got, I'll interject with those. So you're going to have an opportunity to ask lots of questions. A couple instructions I want to give before Dan starts us off. First of all, as Dan shared, put the screen to speaker view so you can see Dan big. I know that all of you are professionals you're professionals with Zoom now, but put that to speakerphone. Secondly, if you can mute yourself while Dan's sharing and we're in main session, so that we're not hearing all the background noise right now. So just everyone, if they can mute themselves. Again, we'll have Q&A after that. You'll have lots of opportunity to ask questions and interact. While Dan is sharing, even while he's sharing, feel free in the chat function to ask a question or make a comment. And Wendy and I will track with those, and we'll make sure that everything's covered by the end of our time. And so Dan will share for about 15, 20 minutes, and then we're going to have a good half hour plus of interaction and questions with Dan. So thanks everyone for being here. Dan, I'm going to hand it to you. And I think all of you know who Dan is. Dan is the executive pastor at 12 Stone Church in the greater Atlanta area of Georgia. And Dan is formerly the executive director of Enjoy Ministries with John Maxwell and is good friends with John Maxwell. And so Dan's experience in leading in the church and leading in the Christian environment is unparalleled. And Dan has become a good friend. He's a mentor, and he has been an absolute blessing to me. So Dan, I want to hand it off to you, and we're just looking forward to having time with you. It's all yours.
Thanks, Darren. And I appreciate this opportunity. I always love to get to pour into leaders and talk with leaders. In fact, a great deal of my passion for coaching and mentoring leaders is fueled by the fact that I've been blessed, fortunate with those who have invested in me. And that's part of really why I feel compelled to invest in others. So I'm fired up to be here with you so that we can learn from each other. And that's what we're going to do today. So my short talk focuses on, ironically, this is called a coaching session. Ironically, what I chose was to talk about how to coach, how to coach a little bit better. So ironically or providentially, I'm going to do a very simple 5-point coaching process that I think will be helpful to you for staff, for top key volunteers, very practical. And I'm going to move, I got my notes, I got pages of notes here. I'm going to move them real quick. If I stay with my notes, I'll go faster so I can get us to the good fun stuff of Q&A. And so let me break it down where we want to go. So clarity, when you know where we're going, we can stay together on this better. 5-point coaching process for healthy and productive leaders, okay? Healthy and productive leaders. And focusing even further on staff and a little bit to key volunteer. And let's start off the top by me giving you what I love to talk about is a 2-word model for coaching that will serve you well. Darren knows this, but a 2-word model for coaching. Now you can read, these big, fat, gigantic books, and that's good. And you can have lengthy, sophisticated processes, that's good. But sometimes in the field, on the go, here's what I think is even better. A 2-word model, here's the 2 words, pay attention. It's a great 2-word model for coaching, pay attention. And because when you pay attention to what's happening around you, and you say, why would I say that? Here's why. We all move fast. We've got lots of things to do, but coaching requires you to slow down. It just does. Coaching and mentoring, they're a little bit different. We can talk about that later if you want, but it requires you to slow down. When you pay attention, you can get the right word to the right person in the right moment. That is brilliant coaching. When you meet with staff, you don't coach them every minute, every meeting. That's just ministry and work. But the mentoring and the coaching, that happens when you're paying attention and you give the right word to the right person in the right moment. Let me tell you something that happened just this week. Talking with a leader, and they were telling me about the criticism. He was telling me about the criticism he's receiving for not posting on social media about anti-racism. He was so frustrated. He said, of course I'm anti-racism. Of course, and I'm all in, I'm involved. But my friends, literally my friends, are critiquing me because I'm not posting on social media. I'm doing other things. I'm doing this, this, and this, but I'm not doing that. And they're upset with me saying, if I don't do that, I'm not doing enough and I'm not doing it in the right way. And he's like, he was frustrated. I said, okay, let's talk. I said, in that moment, I said, let's talk about the difference between leading by your values and leading by the pressures that come at you. And so we begin to unpack that. And again, I don't want to stay here too long. We won't be moving fast at all. I said, your value, because we talk quite a bit, your value is to make a difference. The pressure was to do it a certain way. You need to not be captive to the pressure to do it a certain way and stay true to your value to make a difference. And what you were doing is you were being crushed and collapsed by the pressure to do it a certain way. So we unpack that and work through that. That's a quick example, very relevant, very today, about how to pay attention to a moment where you got to slow down, unpack something, have a moment, say the right word to the right person in the right moment. That's what great coaching looks like. And it's very relevant and it happens along the way. So let's go big picture again. What is the core or central responsibility of every coach? It's to help the team win. We all know that. That's the job of a coach, to help the team win. Now, it's the same thing is true for each person on the team. In other words, to help them win, help every individual win in life and leadership. So let's break that down to 3 nuggets really quick, okay? So what does it mean specifically? That means to increase, and this is what I use, so if it's helpful to you, you can jot it down, to increase their self-awareness and personal security. I always start there with everybody, no matter how long they've been leading, to increase their self-awareness and personal security. Second, to leverage their gifts for high productivity and alignment with God's purpose. That makes it more complicated. And leverage their gifts for high productivity in alignment with God's purpose. And then last, inside, this is the hard part. This is the really hard part. Inside a whole and healthy life. Inside a whole and healthy life. So that's what I work toward. That's what I work on. That's probably helpful to you as well. Now, to the 5-point thing. Ready? We'll see how fast we can do this. Number 1, and some of this will be basic, but I want to challenge you again, at the speed you travel with as many people as you care for, how well do you do it? That's the challenge. So here's the first one. Know the person you're coaching. Know who you're coaching. The better you know the person, the better you know how she or he fits in the culture and the organization, the stronger your coaching will be. For example, we can all coach. I can coach you right now and know very little about you. We can all coach. You can go to lunch with somebody you've never known before and you can coach them. You're just so much better the more you know. For example, give you real live examples of someone, when I'm coaching somebody and I know now that their parents are divorced, his parents are divorced, they're a firstborn, he's an introvert, he's not a risk taker, he's conservative with money, and he's a marathoner. It's not Darren, and he's a marathoner. I'm just gonna be a way better coach. You intuitively are gonna say different things. So knowing their personality, these are the things I go after. This isn't just random examples. Knowing their personality, their gifts and passions, their history, their struggles, their successes, all that helps. And that's not hard to get to know. You just gotta slow down. Then specifically, I look for things as little, as simple, as practical as this. Are they a morning or night person? Are they introvert or extrovert? Are they planner or spontaneous? Are they detailed or big picture? One I love this one, is are they a grace person or a truth person? That just highly governs what you say and what you do. I'll give you one more here. I'll go one level even more specific. Communication style. Because communication's everything, right? Communication style, 2 things. Most people that you lead, particularly on staff, are either more verbal or more written? In terms of critical communication, some want to talk with you, some want to have it in writing. You should know which one they are. You do both, but you should know which one. Second, style and personality. Some people, some people are feather and some people are 2x4. The feather people, you just, when you're in a critical conversation, you just barely whisper it and that's all they need. You do any more than that, they think you're mad at them. They just need a feather touch and they got it. Others, if you don't literally hit them over the head with a 2x4, they literally don't even think you're talking. They don't even think you said something. And I can list numbers of people on both sides of those spectrums. That's your job to know which one they are. Okay, 2, are we doing good? You keeping up? I know we're going fast. Get on the person's agenda. Get on their agenda. Get on their agenda and help them grow. If you get on their agenda, they'll take care of your agenda. I don't like saying that. That sounds ugly, but it's also true. Get on your agenda so help them grow. But if you get on their agenda, they'll get on yours, meaning the organizational elements. But it's first got to be about their agenda and helping them grow. And that always starts with asking questions. And that's so much better than you answering. This is one of the mistakes I've made, and I still do it. I know better, and I still do it. I answer questions people aren't asking. And I'm dumb every time I do that. I know why I do it. I do it out of passion, but it's never smart. It's never smart to answer questions nobody's asking. And so start with questions and with their questions. And then start with a longer view. Here's the longer view. It's really two simple questions. What do you want to be doing in 5 years? And who do you want to be in 5 years? It's amazing how many staff supervisors I talk to, they jump right into the immediate of how many recruit volunteers do you have? They don't have no idea who this person wants to be and where they want to go. 2 simple questions. What do you want to be doing in 5 years? And who do you want to be? Then I move to these 3 questions. Now, do you ask all these questions every time? No. You pick out the ones you need in the moment. But these are the ones I work with. The first one is, what's working, what's not working? They always have an answer. What's working, what's not working? Then I go to, how can I help? And third is, what do you need? And when things are tense, if they're struggling, if it's not working, this is my internal driver. I'll do anything I can to help you except your job. I'll do anything to help you except I'm not going to do your job, but I'll do anything short of that to help you. See, different leaders, let me see how we're doing on time here. Different leaders have different needs, expectations and styles. For example, let me switch out of staff for a second and go to really high-end volunteer leaders. I've led for a long, long time, decades actually, 19 years here at 12 Stone, something we call Joshua's Man. It's a 1-year-long intensive leadership, hand-picked leadership development process. And there's 10 books they go through, they're videotape preaching. It's a cool thing. I haven't had my own group for a number of years. I have 6 high-end business leaders who have 8 guys each. We invite 48 guys in a year. And these are sharp business guys, Christian business guys who lead the groups, and I lead them. Now, here's how I approach them, because they're different than others. They don't have much time and they don't want much time. They're sharp. They don't have much time and they don't want much of my time. Here's what they value. It's important that I know it. They value my availability and my response time. Now, do you see how that connects to they don't have much time and what they need? They value my availability and my response time for what? For resourcing, ideas, support, and advice. That's it. They don't want anything more. And so I'm very quick to coach and be available, be there in those ways. Now, let me show you a crazy contrast. Let's go to young leaders, maybe young on staff, young in life. For young leaders, it's entirely different needs and expectation. It's anything from identity to their security, to relationship skills, to balancing home and job. It's an entirely different thing. Everybody, you've got to be on the track that they're on. Get on their agenda. Get on their agenda. There's only two times where you get more aggressive in terms of being more directive up front. And when there's the two scenarios where you need to be more directive up front is if they're struggling in performance. Now we're back on staff. If they're struggling in performance, you have to be more directive right away. You still use questions, but you're more directive. You're pointing the way. And if you're working with a young leader who really doesn't have an answer to the question, what do you want to do in 5 years? Who do you want to be in 5 years? Now you're still asking questions, but you're pointing the ship, you're guiding them, you're helping them experiment, you're helping mentor and coach them along. Okay. Number 3, we'll take another minute longer here, and we'll do 4 and 5 like in 30 seconds each. Number 3 is focus on habits over goals. I love this one. It may be not new to you, but there's a fresh approach, and I'm giving credit here to a lot of my points to James Clear. If you've never seen this book, it's a great book. I'm giving you the majority of the book in about 3 minutes. Atomic Habits is the name of the book. Anybody raise your hand? Anybody have read the book, seen the book? Yeah, it's 2, 3, 4 of you. Atomic Habits. It's a very good book. Don't get discouraged by the by the amount of detail up front. It gets a little boggy in the beginning, but it's worth it. Stay with it. Keep going. So Atomic Habits. I've done a lot of homework for point 3 from this book. So here we go. Number 3 is focus on habits over goals. Focus on habits over goals, meaning your systems for desired results. What does this mean? It means the goals are about results you want to achieve. The goals are about the results you want to achieve. And you're helping somebody achieve their goals in their life. Systems are the habits are the systems, are about the process to get you to the results. Far too often, we just talk all about the goals and say, go get them. And there's very little work on the process or the development and the discipline to get there. That's everything. Like you might have the desired outcome of opening the doors of your church on July 15th and realizing steady growth. Well, that's a goal. Well, that goal by itself isn't going to do anything, right? You know that. It's about the systems and habits, the way you recruit, the way you retrain your volunteers, develop leaders, how are you going to express hospitality? What about safety of the kids? Masks on, and you got to keep doing that week after week after week. See, goals are good for setting direction, but systems are best for making progress, the habits. Goals are the same for those who succeed and fail. This is where it gets really interesting. The goals are the same. When you look at people who fail and succeed, the ones you're trying to help mentor and coach, the goals are the same. Let's take a simple one. A goal of financial freedom. Some good Dave Ramsey stuff, right? Some good Dave Ramsey here.
Information is important, but actual deliverables is better. And
just make sure everyone's muted.
As much as you
can. Okay. I thought that was the voice of God. I don't know. What was that? We were chiming in on something there. So financial freedom, that's a great goal, but it's the habits or the systems, like following a budget, committing to saving, generous in giving, no debt. That's what actually gets you there. That's what gets you there. You see, achieving a goal only changes your life for a moment. Here's the insight. You can have financial freedom and lose it. You could have millions and lose it because you didn't continue the goals and the process. You didn't continue the process and the systems. That's the whole point. That's the big idea, that the achieving new habits changes your life forever. Here's one more point I'll give you there that I love from James Clear. You never rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. You fall to the level of your habits. That's so good. Let me give you 4 and 5 and stop so we can go have some real fun and go to Q&A. Number 4, and if anybody heard that little 9-minute video from Leadership Network Conference, the next normal, you heard me say this, but it's so important. I want to take 30 seconds here. Be willing to have the last 10% conversation. That's so often left out in the coaching process. You don't have to do this a lot. You don't want to do it a lot, but let me tell you what the last 10% means. There's 4 parts to it. And it's so important. The last 10% is about saying things that need to be said for the good of the person that you don't want to say because it might risk the relationship. It's a hard thing. Something that needs to be said for the good of the person. You don't want to say it because it'll put the relationship at risk. That's gigantic for your ability to pay attention, discern the right moment and do that. And the last one I'll close with is number 5, is follow up. Following up means stay in the game. It means literally ending where you started, ending with paying attention, ending with staying in the game, which is right where you started, is paying attention. Now, I know I did about an hour of stuff in about 17 minutes or something like that. And that's fast, but I went on purpose because I wanted just to kind of stir that up, because honestly, those points there, we can go anywhere you want now. We can go anywhere in leadership. We can go anywhere in staffing. So Wendy and Darren, I'm going to give it back to you, and you let me know where you want me to go.
Fantastic. I want to open it up. We're going to have some interactive time with Dan now, which I know some of you have been really looking forward to. You're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions. And what I'd encourage you is in the chat function, just start writing out some of your questions in there. And even as you put them, then I'll point to you. You can ask Dan it, but it'll allow us a way to kind of do it in an organized way so we don't have 7 of you shouting out at once. And so I'll give you an opportunity to ask it. But Dan, I'm going to start here. A couple questions came in ahead of time while people are putting some in the chat. A couple questions came in ahead of time about keeping staff accountable. And I would love for you to speak into that. How do you hold staff accountable, not coming across as nagging or controlling, but how do you, when staff, you've got goals, you're trying to establish them, but they're not getting done. How do you work that with staff?
Yeah, well, I think it does, with the goals, I think a key word there, a key clarifying word is expectations, communication and expectation. That you've got to be upfront and talk about literally what is expected, what's the timeline for it to be expected, and then you have to write it down. There has to be a tool that you use in some way or another. We use maps. We're actually in the process of changing ours, but we have a digital process in our HR system where all the goals for every staff member for every X number of months are written down. They're agreed upon with their supervisor. And they are not gotcha goals. They're not gotcha like you did something wrong. They're developmental. They're organizationally based goals, but they're developmental. So if they're struggling, we first don't go to, why didn't you do your job? We first go to, how can we help you be a better leader so you can do your job? Now, where that goes over time, though, if there's a repeated inability to do that and they can't make the expectations, then the accountability is built in because they're agreed upon expectations or goals. There's a coaching process that's happening. There is clear verbal communication that says it's not working, if it's not working. And then in a way at the end, tough decisions get made based on all that. Where we get in trouble is if you, what we call gunny sack, you don't do anything, there's no consequences for not doing something about it. And then the relationships begin to break down, and then you make a kind of a rash surprise decision. That's what doesn't work. So those things I just listed is literally how I think the best way to hold accountability. But you have to be willing to make the tough call at the end of the day. End of the day meaning months down the road.
Right, that's great, Dan. Now, a few of you had emailed me in that question ahead of time. Those of you who did, if you want to tag off of that, if you want to add a little more, farther. If Dan answered what you wanted, or you've got a specific scenario you want to talk through, feel free to jump in. If not, I'll hand it off to Ryan. Ryan, you submitted a question. You asked your question to Dan there. That's a great question.
Yeah, Dan, I think like most of us probably on this call, we're in this role because we're good at connecting dots between vision execution and making vision real. My biggest struggle in coaching with my direct reports is I jump too quickly into being directive. Here's what you need to do in order to solve the problem you just brought to me. I know that's a weakness of mine. Instead of solving the problem for them, I need to help them develop their ability to do so for themselves. What would you suggest for me?
Here's a great idea for you, Ryan. We ask staff members always to come into when they bring their problems in, we ask them to bring 2 or 3 solutions. Never one, because it's too easy to marry that under pressure and defend it. When we ask them to bring 2 to 3, we're teaching them critical thinking. And then together what we do is we look at the 2 or 3 solutions that they present. And if a 4th one is needed, we merge them and then that's my job, is to help them come up with the 4th one, because they've done good work, and maybe we're taking bits and pieces of 2 and 3 and making a 4th one together. That's synergy, and they're growing and learning because they brought solutions to you. That's a great way to go.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Sure, good.
Dan, one of the questions that came ahead of time as well is, well, actually, I'm going to take this question in a different direction. We just had one come in about accountability, so I'll stay on this one. Arlena, hopefully I have that right. Why don't you jump in this question you have?
Yeah, I just want to know what, hello everyone, and thanks Dan for doing this.
Sure.
What is accountability? What does that actually look like or mean for you and a staff member?
Well, Arlena, you might want to flesh that out for me a little bit, because philosophically, I actually loved your question, because philosophically, I don't even believe in accountability. and here's what I mean by that. You go, what is wrong with you? Here's what I mean by that. You can't make anybody be accountable to anything. They have to choose to be accountable to you, to a process, to a system. So let me just acknowledge that up front. So already you have kind of a relational agreement that they want to be accountable. Now, that said, I think accountability is to the job description, which you need to have. It's important to have are we talking about a staff, Arlena, staff members?
Yes, okay. Staff.
So, because it's a little different for volunteers.
Absolutely.
So there's an expectation, there's a clear job description. We always recommend bullet, very, very net, clear bullet job, not big, fat, fuzzy, unclear, but very net bullets, okay? And those are looked at and agreed upon all the time, not put in a drawer and forgotten. Then those highly interactive and talked about and discussed and prayed over goals, and then expectations and timelines of when they're to be done. So the accountability is, we expect you to do that or grow in your leadership to be able to do that. So in a developmental culture, the first thing is, if you can't do that, we're going to help grow you as a leader to do that. So part of the accountability is me. I have to be accountable to help you grow. And typically, on the 2X factor, we want to pour twice as much into you as we expect back out. So this is what we're expecting in terms of outcomes, but you can expect from us leadership development to help you get there. If you, Arlena, are being faithful in your development, or others are helping develop, but they are not keeping up, it's not working, then at some point in time, they're accountable to answer the question, can they do the job or can they not? Doesn't mean you don't love them or you don't like them. It means they can't do the job. And so you don't want to leave them there frustrated in their own personhood, and you can't leave them there for the sake of the organization. So you either have to move them to another spot, another role, or you have to make the tough call. That's what accountability means.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. Hey, Josh, jump in with your question that you put down. That's great.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Darren. Yeah, Dan, good to see you again.
Hey, Josh.
Quick question. So I got a ministry leader who, they get the work done, but they don't know how to grow the ministry. They don't know how to push it down the road. And so really what I feel like the role I've become is like, I'm running your ministry, you're just doing the work. So, you know, when it comes to say groups, it's like, how do we grow our groups? How do we get our groups more engaged? How do we get people into our groups? I don't know. Well, here's some ideas. Great. Love those ideas. I'll make them happen. And they go and they crush them. They are a get it done person, but I don't know if it's like they're just not a leader, or how do you help them tap into that vision side of it, I guess you would, or, you know, start running with the vision and, you know, making it happen, those goals to accomplish. They like you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, like helping them discover what are the goals you need to discover, you know, reading, what is the discipline of execution, I think it is. Disciplines of execution. They talk about don't give your ministry leaders their vision, like let them come up with it and then help them, you know, don't dictate that to them, let them do it and then they can run with it. But this person just really struggles in coming up with the vision to begin with.
Yeah. Well, I do think there's some slight contradictions there. I love that book. It's a good book, but there is a bigger vision of the church that everybody comes under. And I'm sure we'll acknowledge that. Then I think one of the ways to help someone who maybe is a builder, which is great, or maybe somebody that isn't even a builder, but they're more of an implementer and they do great when they're told what to do. One of the things we work with in principle, we'll do a principle and a practice, is we try to get them to not focus so much on what the answer you give, Josh, but how you think. So I think sometimes that individual, they cling on to just tell me what to do, tell me how to do it. And what you tell them is really good. It's really helpful. They're like, thank you. I can go do that. But we try to train them and say, I want you to pay attention, not to just what we say, but how we think. Because otherwise they're never going to multiply themselves and to be able to go think it out themselves. So that's one to say, when you listen to me or you, Josh, or other people or the senior, you know, are you trying to figure out how they think or just what they say? Because that's really what great mentorees do, is they figure out how the mentor and the coach thinks. Okay. On the practical side, I would literally sit with this man or woman and say, let's work on some visionary goals. Let's sit down here and dream together about what does it mean to think going from this many small groups to this many small groups, or this kind of spiritual development to this kind, and literally say, okay, I just gave two. Now let me see. Now you do one. You do one. Now I'll do one more. Now you do one. It's literally showing them how you think and showing them how it results on paper, and then literally workshop it right there in the moment. Say, now you do something.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
And if he literally says, I can't, then you're looking for a breakthrough and say, we got to figure out why it is you can't, because I think you can.
That's really good, Dan. Hey, I want to just a reminder, stay on mute if you're not asking a question. We've got one person, I think Janet, you're not on mute. So if you can just make sure you stay on mute. Let me go to the next question here. Andrew, you jump in with your question about the last 10%.
Thank you, Dan, for answering the question. I'm just wondering, you know, it's always good to get to the 10%. The last 10% is the toughest part of the conversation.
Yes, sir.
Would that be, is there a process that you usually use, and what would that look like? And if there's pushback, and what would you recommend to do?
I don't know what you mean by pushback. Are you saying that they just resist what you're saying, or?
They just resist in saying, or they don't even want to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, then there's a problem that if they don't even want to talk about it, then you got to way back up. And so I don't want to bog us down here, but you back way up to trust and a relationship, because to be really be candid, to be candid, you don't have an option. You don't get to say, I don't want to talk about it. That's not an option. That's not even mature. That's not even adult. You know what I hate to be so blunt, but there's no option. You mean you don't want to talk about it? We're going to talk about it, okay? And so it could even be as big as the environment or the culture. Maybe that's allowed. And I would say you got to go really big and deep and work on communication, and honest conversations have to be allowed. And trust is at the core. And so I would go out there and work on that stuff first, then come back in and say, look, you and I, we trust each other. You know, I'm in this for your good. You want to succeed. I want you to succeed. We both want the organization to succeed. We've got to talk about something here that's tough to talk about, but we have to do it. And then you jump in and go for it. You just have the conversation. There's a book, somebody, you could probably help us here. I can't remember the authors, but it's literally called like Tough Conversations or Difficult. It's what is that book titled?
Crucial
These conversations.
So, yeah.
What is it?
Crucial Conversations.
Yes, there it is. Thank you. There's a book called Crucial Conversations. Who can tell us the author? There it is. Is that it?
Harry Patterson.
There it is. That's a great book. I would use that for the more step-by-step parts. After the trust and the culture, and you don't have an option. Of course, we talk about that. That's a great book for having crucial conversations.
Thank you.
Paul, if you can put the author, just for anyone who wanted it, just in the chat, just type out the full title, author. There seems to be a few different Fierce Conversations, Difficult Conversation books. So put that in there, put the information. Everyone can check that in the chat and make sure you get that, because those resources are phenomenally helpful. So that's much appreciated. Hey, Paul, you had a question. Jump in with your question about working with diverse staff.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Question I have is, we have a very diverse staff as regards to personality, skill sets, etc. So my question is, we've done a bunch of different things with our staff, is just to help know the staff, as you said in number one, just to get to know each other better. Is there anything specifically that you use to help, in general, get to know your staff a little bit better? Enneagrams or?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, Enneagram has become a little controversial, so I'm not sure we're going to go down that road right now. Although I can with this group, there's no problem with that. So we use Right Path.
You go for it, Dan. Let's mix it up.
You want to mix it up?
Yeah, you go for it. Come on. That's why we're here.
Well, I became a quick student of Enneagram, and we learned quite a bit, but we were starting to get pushback by people in the congregation and staff members about its origin.
Right.
So I actually hired somebody to do deep research on its origin and got just enough stuff back to say, you know what, we're not going to ban it. We're not banning books. We're not being weird. It's still a fun tool. We still use it on staff. We just no longer have it as an official tool. We don't promote it. We don't push it. We just do it more for fun, because like I'm an 8, I'm a 7, I'm a 3. But so that's just not really probably a tool we're going to use, but it's not banned. It's not weird. We're not weird about it. It's just not an official one at 12 Stone.
Right.
So to Paul, for you, we use Right Path. And so right off the bat, that's a great tool that HR runs, that everybody knows the language. Everybody talks the same way. We get it. And we use that for a tool to mix it up. And I recommend that whatever tool you use, whether it's Myers-Briggs or Right Path or whatever, or Enneagram, whatever one you like, then use the one tool so everybody gets the language. That's super helpful. Second, we create environments all the time that help people just talk to each other. We do a lot of our. Okay, I'll back up. Our leadership development big picture is in 3 big environments. We have large group teaching, we have roundtable discussion, and one-on-one coaching. And the one-on-one coaching is connected to their job description and the growth points and all that. Paul, to your question, that middle group, the roundtable discussions, we do a lot of, they're guided, where they're on purpose. We write study questions. We do a lot of that. And that is exactly where that happens. There's a lot of getting to know you. Who are you? And they're not tokenistic. I mean, we're talking 45 and 50 minutes out of, it's half the time in a teaching session where they're in a group and they're talking to each other. We call it peer-to-peer table conversation. And so for us, it happens there.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Darren, keep the questions going. You had a great one.
Yeah, Dan, I love those tests, and I've heard people use those in different ways, and sometimes as a default for maybe some poor behaviors. For example, with the truth, person who's very strong speaking truth will lack grace when it's needed in situations, and they'll say, hey, that's the way God made me. He made me a truth person, and I'm all about the truth. And how, with a lot of those different areas, at what point do you coach them out of their natural bent to say, hey, this may be your natural inclination, but you need to balance it with this other trait?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I love it because that's the nuance of where we live, Darren. And so we're really upfront in the relational fields, because a lot of our coaching is based on what gets people above zero and moves forward. In other words, we don't focus on weaknesses, we focus on strengths. The two places we focus on weakness is right where you're talking about. The only time we ever camp there at all is if any behavior affects the quality of their relationships with other people, or any behavior affects the quality of their relationship with God. And so you don't get to do things that deteriorate or break down relationships. So what we say is, we want you to be you, be authentically you, but if the real you or the version of the real you you're promoting is breaking relationships, that's when we say you don't get to do it that way. And so we're going to coach you up and talk about why you can't. You still be you, but you don't get to do it like that because you're breaking relationships. That's the only place we step in. And then we get very, very specific. We go to the last 10% conversation, they say, well, what do you mean? We'll say, when you said this way to this person, you're leaving body bags. You don't get to do that. And so we just literally say it.
Good. Yeah, I like that response. It's very, very focused on the relational piece of it. Probably the witness would be a part of that too. Maybe that's your relationship with God.
Yep. Well, the witness, I thought you were going to go to outside evangelistic, witness, which certainly would be in a relational realm as well. For us, on the walk with God is, if there's any behavior that's just kind of unbecoming a Christian life that breaks a relationship with God, that we're gonna address that too.
Yeah, thank you.
Katie, you had a follow-up question on this one. You kind of had two questions, one follow-up on this and then a separate question. So jump into those.
Hey, Dan. I just was wondering, I love what you just said there about only focusing on weaknesses with those two areas. Can you give it like a practical example of a weakness that you would leave with a direct report? Something that you would say, I'm not going to focus on this then?
I'm sorry. I don't quite have the question yet.
Sorry. For sure, there are things that don't fall into those two categories. And I just was wondering if you had a specific example of something that you would leave and not address a space where you would not address a weakness with a direct report. I mean, a weakness that's not in those two categories that I would let it go. Yeah.
Okay. So here's a common one, and I'll give you a counter to it as well. So a lot of leadership staff in local churches environments, they're not very administrative. And so we could call that a weakness. I'm probably not going to chase it just because I'm not going to fix that. I'm not going to change who they are. And so I'd rather buttress their skills where they can get volunteers to help them do administrative things rather than trying to make them become administrative when they're never going to be. Now, let me give an example where I would say they've crossed the line with that. If they were to say, well, Dan, you know, I'm not administrative. I don't do that kind of stuff. And we're talking about their budget and they keep going over their budget or breaking their budget, whatever. Now we're going to go back to responsibility and maturity. You don't have to be administrative, but you do have to stay with your budget and do your budget. There are some things that you just have to learn how to do. So there are boundaries there, but administration, a little general, but that would be an example of something I'm probably not going to chase.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks so much. My second question was just wondering, you kind of answered part of it in explaining the 3 levels of your leadership development for staff. Specifically within coaching, do you guys build out any other types of coaches for staff around other areas that are not their direct supervisor? So do your staff have coaches that you would have kind of arranged for them as part of their leadership development within the team that aren't?
Yes, 2 or 3 things. I'll see how much I can remember. I always say 2 or 3. It's probably 5. And by the time I get to 4, I don't even know what I said before. So one is right in-house. There's an open door thing for somebody who's not your supervisor, but you just think they're cool or smart or helpful, and you go, can we go get coffee? So we have a lot of sharp people here, and if somebody has a relational connection and they're interested, can I get some mentoring with you or you? Absolutely. Now, typically we don't have them climb into the details of their work because we don't want to be contradicting their supervisor. But mentoring and coaching in general, absolutely. Another example is we actually contract professional coaches for staff. Let me give you a literal live example, okay? Do you know Katie Cole? Do you know Katie Cole? Yeah. So right now we have 5 of our young female leaders we've contracted with Katie Cole, and she's coaching them one-on-one directly. And simply because we don't have enough yet women leaders who are good coaches, but we have to raise them up. And sometimes the one-on-one doesn't always work. I can't really well coach 20-something young, you know what I mean? That's not going to work. So we'll bring in professional coaches and leaders to help us fill in the gaps that we can't do.
That's super helpful. Thanks so much, Dan.
Sure.
As an aside on that note that Dan just pointed out regarding Katie Cole, next week we have a coaching call with Katie Cole talking about developing female leaders. So Dan gave a little plug for our time next week. That feel free and inclined to sign up for that as well through your all access pass. Dan, she's phenomenal.
She's awesome. Yeah,
she's a total brilliant rock star. Absolutely. Dan, one of the questions that came in ahead of time was things to avoid when hiring staff. And so can you speak into that, things that you need to avoid when hiring staff?
I don't know if the question is more about process or if it's about actual traits in the staff member. I'm going to go to process first, and then somebody, whoever asked it, stop us, interrupt us. I want to stay on your agenda.
Precisely.
You can just say, no, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
In terms of process, I'm going to go back to an example I already brought up earlier, but a different application of it. One of the number one things we make a mistake with, I certainly have, I still do, I try not to do it very much anymore, but I certainly have, is we hire according to pressures rather than real needs. We hire according to pressures rather than vision. We hire according to pressure rather than the next best step to move the organization down the road. We do that. Churches do that way more than they think they do, and I get it. You know, we're like, we got pressure. Let's hire somebody and make the pressure go away. That's something to be really careful of, because every time you have an opening, that's the time to not look to pressure, to stopping pressure. It's the time to turn to opportunity. Don't let opportunity be gobbled up by pressure. And so by opportunity is, we have a hole, we have pressure, we don't like pressure, but what is our opportunity? What if we moved a staff member? What if we changed the job description? What if we did this over here? What if we split this job? What if we did this? Go there first before you give into pressure. I know I'm kind of going random, but I don't know the specific question. That's one gigantic thing I would work with. The second, I think, is never short circuit. I'll just do two because I want to find out what the person really wants. Never short circuit the process. Again, for us, speed is everything. Speed, we want to go faster and faster because we don't have a choice. And so sometimes we'll short circuit the process in all of our interviewing, and we'll have a team of 7 doing interviews. And then when we did it wrong, and it will still try to do it, but we don't allow it, is everybody will just get on a text run and say, what do you think? Green light, what do you think? I'm good to go. What do you think? Good, green light, good to go. Bad call. What a good call to do is get the interviewers, whether there's 2 or 3 or 7, get them all back in a room. And I'll tell you what happens every time. Every time. You get all the interviewers back in the room to discuss the candidate. And what a healthy process does, and this happens every time, is the whole room will sway to, no way, we're not hiring them. Then the room will swing back to, oh, we're going to hire them. Then the room will swing back to, that's what it should look like, because you're pushing and pulling and asking questions and pushing for reasons why. That's a healthy process. And here's what the end should look like, and I'll stop. The end should look like, it's never, ever, ever, well, we've looked at 7 candidates. She's pretty good. I think she could do it. We've been in this for 3 months. We're done with this. Let's just hire her. Big mistake. Every hire you do, you should be head over heels. You can't wait. This is the person. This is a rock star. You're so sure you can't help yourself. That's the person. Now you know you've got a good decision.
That's brilliant, Dan. With whoever asked that question, was there any follow-up on it that you wanted Dan to speak into?
Yeah, I may not even have been anywhere near what they were actually wanted to know. So.
Well, it was great. It's great insight. Abel, you got something there?
Yeah, I asked that question. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, it was more about the process on hiring, staff, and what are some of the things you want to avoid, especially like our case where we're a small church and we don't have too many. I'll be honest, I'm the only paid staff member, and so the rest of the church operates on volunteer staff. But I think there comes a time where you can only get so far with volunteer staff. So
True.
I think there's a point where you have to start saying, okay, we gotta start hiring some people part-time, especially if the church is growing, right? The church is growing, and so I'm trying to hold off to see how far we can get with volunteer staff, but sometimes I'm like, man, I just need some full-time people. So.
And you probably do. I don't know your numbers and ratios and stuff, but I'll give you one thing that might be helpful. Let's just assume, Abel, that you need some help. Okay, let's just assume that for a moment, and you're ready to make a hire, part-time or full-time. Here's what I would encourage you to do. Don't hire support first. Hire people who will move the ball down the field. Your tendency, my tendency, our tendency is to relieve pressure. Again, I'm going to go there, and to get the junk off the table. And we eventually need help with that. And that's important, management kind of things. But particularly when you're hiring your first hires, hire people who are going to grow the church, not help it run smoother. I would, if you could get that discipline in the water, that 9 out of 10, every 4 out of 5, every 9 out of 10, you're hiring somebody that's going to move the needle and grow the church. And then 1 out of, the very smaller ones, you're hiring people who are going to just help you keep the thing going. You'll be really happy you did. It's kind of like with hiring administrative assistants, executive assistants and administratives and project people. Incredibly important. We would be sunk without them. We tell them all the time, you guys run 12-star. Without you, we're in trouble. But here's one of the first things we always remind any staff who's hiring support. You never hire support to make your life easier. You hire support to make your life more productive. And we're fierce about that rule. We're fierce about that.
I love the add-on question, because sometimes the add-on question gives the last 10% of insight. And Dan, that was absolute gold. Katie, you speak into, you asked another question here for Dan on the flip side of that. So you asked that question there.
Yeah, just I so appreciated what you shared about the process side and hiring on the characteristic side. Are there things that you would say, like, we absolutely avoid these kind of characteristics or these things in a candidate?
No, I tell you what I can do is I could send to Wendy and Darren later. We just finished a project that took us months of we stole the concept from Life Church of staff aligning values. And we've always known them because we're an intuitive group, but we're not as disciplined always as we should be. So we don't write stuff down very well. And we're so past the need, we need to do that better. So we've been working on that for a long time now, piece at a time, at a piece at a time. And we just finished our aligning values. We're working on our sustaining values. Now ours are obviously different than theirs, but I'm giving credit for the big idea. And the sustaining values is this set. For us, they were the seven traits or characteristics of staff that are with us, who are long-term, highly successful, love being here, and may be here for a very, very, very long time. And we know what those are, and we try to hire, and we're learning how to hire to them by the fact that we're writing, the next part of our project is we're going to be writing our hiring questions, our interview questions underneath those 7 traits. I'd be happy to send our list of traits to Darren and Wendy, and he can just give them to you.
Yeah.
And then you can see, so that's not, you said, what will we not do? I'll give you one idea there, but we really focus more on what would we do. And what we would do is hire to that group, and somebody who doesn't fit in those things, we're probably going to begin to move away from. I'll give you one example that will answer your question in both realms. What would we not do? And you'll see it on the list of where it is, of who we want. We're a high drive organization. One of the things, we have 45 supervisors. And one of the things I hear most common as chief of staff, why they didn't pick somebody, and they'll say this, just organically, they'll say, didn't have enough drive. They just didn't have enough drive. For us in our shop, drive is a big deal. Self-motivating, self-initiating, all that stuff. And so we're just not going to hire somebody with low drive. That doesn't mean that that's wrong or bad or that you shouldn't, just means that's not going to work for us, and we know it, so we don't let ourselves do that. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great. Super
good.
Helpful.
If from this time, because I want to get that resource to all of you, many of you had officially signed up for this coaching call before today. So we have your email address. That's great. Some of you, just from the reminder email that went out from the conference this morning, you connected into the Zoom link. Those of you who connected in with the Zoom link today without previously signing up, put your name and email address in the chat. Just name, email address in the chat, and we will follow up and get this resource to all of you. So just put it in there. As you're doing that, Dan, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to wrap up our time because we're right at top of the hour. How has COVID-19, with all the realities of online, how does that change how we need to think about staffing for the future, the kind of people we're looking for, roles and so forth? Just give a real quick to wrap up our time, because this is something we're all wrestling with.
Yeah, well, that question comes up a lot. So there's 3 big parts of it. We might do 1 or 2 of them. The part that I don't know that we should try to address is like, what are the new roles? What is the thing? Because every church is so different. And I can give you the generic answer that you'll all yawn because we already know the answer. And just think online, think online, think online, because that is a truth for all churches. But other than online, everybody's going to do it different. So I want to back up to principle based, and if we have 1 more minute, kind of personal based. On the principle side, The characteristics that are heightened now are adaptability, resilience, and improvement. The adaptability is so key. The resilience, the ability to bounce back from setbacks, to stay in the game through just being beat up. I mean, COVID's beating people up. I mean, it just is. And then improvement, because adaptability by itself, changing just because you change, that doesn't impress. But because you got better, we always say here, doing it different, we don't care. Doing it better, now we're talking. And so there's a big difference between doing something different and doing something better. So adaptability, resilience, and improvement, big things we're looking for. On the personal side, actually I'm doing this one tomorrow on Rethink, that Kevin, I think I wrote a blog, I know I wrote a blog post on how people come back to church. The group one, they're running back, group two, they're walking back, group three, they might not come back. And Kevin has a brilliant example he did for a whole sermon on how people come back, not when, is we did a red light, green light, yellow light. So the green light, those are the running back people. They don't need any masks, they want a hug, right? The yellow light, they're coming back slow, they'll come back when they want to, they want to make sure you're clean and organized, and they're definitely going to have a mask ready. Red light, they'll come back maybe in 6 months, maybe not at all. Maybe they're going to do online now because they fell in love with going to church in their jammies and eating pancakes. So they're just going to do it. And here's the thing that we're all learning. That impacted our staff more than we thought. We are discovering we have red light, green light, and yellow light staff everywhere. And until we figured that out, there were peer pressure issues, there were concerns, and we're discovering things about culture where some churches, they don't even feel like they have permission or freedom to say how they feel and that they're worried, and how this impacts. I mean, think about it. If you're actually worried about coming back yourself and being with thousands of people or hundreds of people, how can you possibly do your job? But if you're afraid to talk about it because you don't have the freedom to talk about it, or you might be made fun of or by the Greens, you know what I mean? That is a big conversation that we're discovering, on top of some of your staff are feeling, this is a huge conversation we're having in other large churches. Some of your staff are feeling like, am I even needed? They got along without me for a long time. What happens if the economy turns and we have to cut back? Are they even going to keep me? Your staff are thinking these things. If they're not telling you, I'm telling you now, they're thinking these things, and you'd be wise to create environments where they get to talk about it. You can't promise them the future, okay? You can't promise them the future, but you can promise them honesty and trust and integrity, and we're going to do the best we can together. And that's all they really want. That's all they really need.
Dan, I want to thank you so much. Your wisdom, I call Dan, he's heard me say this a few times, but Dan's Yoda to me. Dan is the Yoda in my life. All right. He just has this wisdom that of 900 years in a real single life.
And you know what he says that? I'm going to interrupt you and I'll let you finish. That's his nice way of saying I'm old.
Oh no, the wisdom blesses me every time. Dan, you have imparted so much to us, and so we want to thank you for this time. I want all of you here to know too, Dan is one of the most selfless leaders I've ever met in terms of his heart to just give away all that God's entrusted to him. So Dan, thank you for investing in all of us as leaders and followers of Jesus over this last hour. Thank you.
My pleasure, my honor, and let me know how I can help.
Absolutely. Thank all of you for being part of this time. I trust it's been an immense blessing for you. We're going to follow up with you and get you that resource that Dan referred to as well. We'll keep you updated as to other opportunities coming up. Katie Cole's coaching call is next week. Love to have you on that. I'm going to be back on that with Katie as well. Looking forward to that. It's going to be really, really significant, not just in terms of developing female leaders, but really Katie and I are going to have a conversation about developing any of those who are in essentially minority realities, and how do we make sure that everyone is at the table as God would intend. So sign up for that through your All Access Pass. And again, we'll get you those resources. Thanks for being with us. Absolute blessing. If we can do anything to help, let us know. Thanks all. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.